In the previous session, we have seen different system unit components required for assembling a PC. We have also discussed that we should take care of some static precautions and we should have the screws and cable ties ready before beginning the assembly process. We have the system unit components and it's time to put them together. Let's see how we can fit the system unit components one by one. First, we shall fit the processor on the motherboard. Open the socket lever by pulling it up slightly, without forcing anything. Put the processor into the motherboard socket. If you are unsure which way to place the processor, look for the groove and notches on the processor and heatsink. Alternatively, locate the gold triangle which is in one corner of top of the processor. Once the processor is in, close the socket hinge and push down the lever. This may require some force, so make sure the processor is positioned correctly in the socket before pushing the lever down. Once closed, you are now ready to fit the heatsink. Now we will fit the heatsink fan to the motherboard. Again, make sure to ground yourself before touching any of the PC components. First step is to check if your heatsink has the thermal compound paste on it. The thermal compound paste shall ensure good heat transfer to the heatsink from the processor, and without it, the processor will overheat. Align the heatsink over the 4 mounting holes round the socket on the motherboard and place it tightly using the screws. Finally, connect the fan power cable to the motherboard. Now we will install the memory modules into their respective DIMM slots on the motherboard. First, open the DIMM slot clip. Align the memory module with the slot, making sure that the memory module lines up with the notch on the slot. Without forcing, slide the module into the slot and push down evenly on each corner until the clips snap into place. This may require some force, so check that you have the module aligned with the slot correctly. Now let's see how we can fit this motherboard into the case. The first thing to do is remove one side of your case and lay the case flat on the ground and insert the one that comes with your motherboard. Risers are inserted into the holes, and in order to prevent the motherboard from touching the case and shorting out the motherboard. Remember that the motherboard must be supported by a riser. Unless there are integrated risers pressed out from the case, you will need to screw risers into each hole. Once the risers are fitted, place the motherboard into the case and line each hole up to the risers. Secure it using the fine threaded screws. Let's see how to connect the case front panel, ports, switches and LEDs to the motherboard. In order to do this, you must find the diagram in your motherboard's manual, which will tell you exactly where each set of pins on the motherboard are. Look up the front panel diagram. Locate the pins that you will need to plug your case front panel connectors into. One by one, plug the connectors into their respective pins, making sure the positive and negative connectors are connected the right way around. Locate the front audio connectors. Notice the missing pins in the second row, which correspond to the field hole on the bottom of the USB connector. In this way, we can connect the front audio connector and the USB front panel connector. Now let's see how to install the hard disk drive into the most common type of case. The position of the hard drive may differ on different types of case. However, the principles will remain the same. If you are at all unsure about how to fit the hard drive into your case, refer the instruction manual that came with the case. First, locate the area that the drive needs to be inserted. Unpack the hard disk and holding it by its side, insert it to the drive slot facing the rear side. Line up 4 of the holes on the hard disk with those on the case and secure them with the large threaded screws. If you are installing a single IDE drive, then set its jumper to master. If you are installing 2 IDE drives on the same cable, one will need to be set as master and other to be set as slave at the jumper or on top of the drive, which will tell you which jumper settings are for which. Slide the optical drive into the slot until the front sits correctly with the case. Using the fine threaded screws, secure the drive in place. Use 2 screws for each side. Now we will connect both the drives to the motherboard. Now let's take an IDE cable and look at it. Most have 3 ports on them, one at each end and one close to one end. Take the end with only one port and plug this into the motherboard, observing both the grooves and the missing pinholes on the connector and matching up with the corresponding gap and missing pins on the motherboard port. Now take the other end and plug the port at the very end of the cable into the optical drive. Same thing needs to be repeated for your hard disk also. Now we will see how to install a power supply into the case. This is the final stage of the build process and also one of the simplest. Almost all components will require power from this power supply, although some components will receive it from the motherboard. Position the power supply into the case and secure it from outside with 4 case screws. Connect the large 24-pin motherboard power connector and make sure the clips are tightly closed, securing the power connector. Now connect the 4-pin or 8-pin motherboard power connector. Now connect the Molex connector and 6-pin PCIe connector, which are usually used for graphics card. In this video, we haven't installed a graphics card. In this way, you can assemble a PC. Now close the case with the cover and fix it with the screws. Here is your complete assembled PC.